Sure. Some water, please. Honorable members, at the break, we were debating a compendium of bills. I presume we are now ready. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I promise not to intrude for an inordinate amount of time, but Madam Speaker, there was two small matters that I thought it was important to address on the record. One of those was a statement made by the Prime Minister where he continued a chorus that had begun on the other side, continued with the member for Carmichael, and now has changed dramatically with the Prime Minister. Madam Speaker, there is this story that is being told that the Free National Movement borrowed a substantial amount of funds when we came to office. And the figures, Madam Speaker, has now changed from $1 billion to now $2 billion, according to the Prime Minister. So I wanted, Madam Speaker, just to correct the record, and so I am on a point of order, member for West End and Bimini. The Prime Minister mentioned $2 billion per year. I just want to go back to your figures. Madam Speaker, I'm looking at the draft estimates of revenue and expenditure from 2022-2023. According to these draft estimates on page 4, colleagues, under the fiscal summary, one of the things you would see, Madam Speaker, is $660 million in the fiscal summary were funds that were carried over from the last year of the Progressive Liberal Party's time in governance. So in 2017, 2018, the borrowing was $415 million. In 2018, 2019, $215 million. In 2019, 2020, roughly $800 million.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exeter in Rikers Island.
I believe this is abusive.
It's not abusive.
Madam Speaker, the member is allocated at least 1 hour to speak. If he wishes to defend the record of the former administration, he's free to do so. But to stand here and give a whole narrative that may be counter to something that someone may or may not have said is really inappropriate. I believe he ought to wait his turn. He's on the schedule, and he has an opportunity to speak at length on the issues he's attempting to raise now, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member, was that something that the Honourable Member today?
Yes, today. The Prime Minister said that we added to the debt $2 billion each year with nothing to show for it, Madam Speaker. The record clearly shows that that is patently untrue. And I'm reading the document. I don't know what, Madam Speaker. Let me just say this calmly, Madam Speaker. The member is seeking to leave something that is inaccurate on the record of the House. I have, Madam Speaker, I have a right to correct the record if it is inaccurate. And all I'm saying, Madam Speaker, is the record is clear. No such thing happened under the Free National Movement. And I'm giving the specific figures for members of the public who heard the Prime Minister's statement that we added $2 billion each year to the debt. And in the first year, 2017, 2018, the new debt was $415 million. 2018, 2019, $215 million. 2019, 2020, after Dorian, $799 million. And then 2020 and 2021, in the midst of COVID, $1.3 billion. So it is untrue. What the Prime Minister sought to do is he put together, Madam Speaker, the refinancing of debt and added it to new debt. So I just want to say to the public, it is untrue what was put on the record of the House. We did not borrow $2 billion each year. And it's shameful. It's shameful.
Why are you trying to out-talk me or over-speak me?
Just like they have a right in the House.
Now, honorable member, are you insinuating that this Speaker gives the latitude to decide and not decide?
I want to be clear. I'm not
No, I want to be clear. Is that what you're saying to me?
You silence me through the speaker, and I'm just correcting the record. That's the point I'm making.
I'm asking you to now lay that document so I can have a full understanding. So when we present these to the people,
Correct.
it's not just for you to say.
Agreed. No problem, Madam Speaker. I'm gonna return to the House the book that has all of the figures I just read. All of it is on page 4 of the fiscal summary that clearly shows what they said was
I'm asking you to now lay that document.
I'm
be careful how you address this chair. This is the second time today that you're saying one rule for them, another rule for you. And don't you dare challenge this chair on the way I operate. Because I'm very fair. I'm very fair.
And Madam Speaker,
I am more than fair.
They cannot have me sit down.
Don't you do that to me.
They cannot.
Don't you do that. Don't you do that.
I am asserting my right to make a point.
Don't you do that to me.
Madam
I'm a very fair speaker, and I give both sides latitude to address any situation. Now you're back here on your feet again, saying the same thing to the speaker, that I'm giving one side for them and one side for me. I do not do that.
No, Madam Speaker.
Don't say that to me. And you made that the last time you say something like that to me.
Madam, let me say
because
exactly
that is not the way I operate.
Madam Speaker, you just gave me an opportunity.
I give you lots of opportunity.
Madam Speaker, you just gave me the opportunity to put on the record what the member for Exuma did not want on the record, so I'm grateful.
And I am asking you now to lay that document. I never gave you the chance. I just want to get a fair understanding so I can address the situation. Remember now, when we talk about rules that guide this place, don't go past page 3. Where the speaker is the principal operator in this place, and I will give everybody a fair chance to correct, add, alter, or correct. But don't you do that to me. Make that the last time in this place that you say something like that to me.
Madam Speaker, just so the public doesn't...
So the public can understand.
The public isn't left with that discussion. The real discussion is
the chair
Prime Minister mentioned $2 billion, and it was absolutely false.
Madam Speaker, the member for Marco City has responded. He has sought to set the record. You've asked him to lay it. Please have it laid so we may continue the debate.
Yes.
Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Fox Hill.
Fox East. You got a guy in better than that. Madam Speaker, when I was listening very carefully to the Leader of the Opposition. When I added up all those figures, it came to $2 billion to me. But anyhow, I left school a long time ago. It sounded like $2 billion to me. So read them again. You know, 1 point this, 700 and this, 500. No, that's okay. No, don't worry. I'm adding them. I remember it. It came to 2 billion. 2 billion. So it sounded like he had it right. No, it sounded like the Prime Minister had it right. 2 billion.
He said on average.
2 billion.
On average.
Anyway, the first thing I want to do, Madam Speaker, as I join this debate this afternoon, in the few minutes that I have to speak. The Foreign Minister of Malaysia was visiting the cabinet of Perry Christie when he was then Prime Minister, and he told 2 stories. The first he said is that he had been away from his home for 6 weeks doing the work of the foreign minister, doing what foreign ministers do, which is to go to foreign lands and say hello to people. Yes. And he said, when he walked into the cabinet room, the Prime Minister said, "Are you sure this is the right meeting you're in?" Because they hadn't seen him in a while. And then secondly, he made the point that one day he was at the United Nations dealing with some major matter with Malaysia. And the phone rang while he was on the floor of the UN, and it was one of his constituents. And the constituent was agitated because the water pump wasn't working in his constituency. And he said to him, "But I'm at the United Nations now. I'm trying to deal with this international problem." And the constituent said, "But the water pump isn't working." So he had to put that UN stuff aside and deal with the water pump. So that's my starting point with this whole exercise, which is that if you look at a budget and the budget exercise and the rituals which we go through annually, the budget means nothing unless the people of the country can see, touch, and feel what those figures mean. And we, on this side, have dedicated ourselves to organizing a budget that people can touch, see, and feel. And that is going to be the mantra going forward for me: touch, see, and feel. A people-focused budget. And I'm also doing this in part because in my other capacity, I have my eyes firmly planted on the year 2026. And I am saying to all who would listen to me that we need your support in that year. Because 5 years is not enough time to get the job done. We need 5 more years. And so, as Lyndon Pindling would have said, steady as she goes. And every year, we're going to chip away at it and chip away at it and chip away at it. And, you know, you go through ups and downs. In 2008, there was a banking crisis, Madam Speaker. And I said then, I was in the Senate in 2008, and I was speaking and referred to the book of Genesis, where Pharaoh calls on Joseph to interpret a dream which he had. And the interpretation of the dream was that there would be 7 years of plenty, you know, and you would have 7 good years. And when you had the 7 good years, you have to save up because the 7 lean years are coming. That also has been a focus of my views in public life, that the way we've managed this budget is that this year we are on the way to, first of all, the lowest level of borrowing in a generation.
Yes.
And this will allow the credit space, the latitude to put money on the ground. And that must be job one, put money on the ground. The budget is going to pay for so many things this year. It's going to pay for the scholarships for the students that will come and apply through the Ministry of Education. It will help Jamal Strawn, who is the Member of Parliament for Nassau Village, to put that community center together. And I want to congratulate him on putting that community center together. It's a big step in helping to build community. You're going to get the water in Eleuthera fixed. That's what the budget's going to do. The road in Red Bays has been finished. That's what the budget's going to do. And you're going to be finishing and fixing the roads in Exuma, building the airport in Cat Island, getting the power back on and up and running in Acklands. So many things this budget will do because it is focused on making sure that we help people. And one of the ways that we're helping people too is the member for Mount Moriah, as you know, is the chair of the Beaches and Parks. And that is a way, again, that funding can be put in the hands of ordinary men and women to do work, to clean up and make our island clean and be maintained. So there's lots that coming.
Excuse me. 1 minute, Foxhill. Honorable member for Central, Grand Bahama. Do you respect the chair? Why are you drinking coffee or tea? No, I'm gonna test it. But I just said not to bring those cups back. You could bring water, or water bottle, or a glass of water. But if we bring the coffee cup and I allow that, then I have to give everybody the opportunity to bring the coffee cup. Once we could just set a rule, and we just want that rule to be obeyed. Okay? We ain't making no fuss. All right. No. This is, you can ask for a glass. All right? Don't bring it back. That's all, Madam Speaker said. All right. Thank you very much. You may proceed, Honorable Member.
You will note, Madam Speaker, in this budget, there is for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs vote, and I will really spend most of my time discussing what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs does, the monies which have been allocated. The Minister of State will deal largely with the public service. But I would like to say before going into foreign affairs that the minister, in my view, is doing an excellent job in executing the work which is before us. There are some structural issues which I've tried to explain about what we are attempting to do in the public service. But one of the main complaints is that things take so long. So, for example, every day you would get in our phones a message which says, I've been working for the public service for 20 years. As a matter of fact, someone just stopped me at the doorstep coming in here this morning. I've been working for 20 years. I'm still on weekly. I need to be put on permanent pension. I've tried to think about why this is an issue, but I'm told that the banks, if you're not on permanent pensionable, the banks somehow don't lend you money. I don't know why that is, since jobs are secure, whether you're weekly or not. And secondly, I was wondering whether or not it's because we don't have a national pension plan, which is portable across employers, which may be contributory or non-contributory. But whatever it is, there is this complaint. And I've tried to explain, first of all, that the public service minister does not, and neither does the Minister of State, promote people in the public service. The role of promotions, transfers, discipline, that is the responsibility of an instrument in the Constitution called the Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission makes those decisions. The way those decisions get to us is through the Ministry of the Public Service. And the starting point is the ministry itself. So, for example, the Ministry of Public Service cannot advance someone to the Public Service Commission for promotion unless that ministry or department makes a recommendation to the Ministry of the Public Service. That's how it works. And the starting point is the department or the ministry. And I explained over the Labor Day weekend in Grand Bahama that one example that I met. I left office by fair means or foul in 2017. And when I left, I was the immigration minister. There were, I would say, 300, I'm using round numbers, people who were hired as immigration officers. So the rank when I left in 2017 was about 300, I think classes of 150 each or so, were trainee immigration officers. When I came back, I was no longer immigration minister, 4.5 years later, not one single one, I'm advised, had been confirmed in their positions in the 4.5 years. Not one, not one. So when we got there in 2021, it was our responsibility to try and see what actually happened. Now, during the 4.5 years, the intelligence coming back was, for those people who were complaining about this, said, well, they're Mitchell's babies, so you go to him if you want to get confirmed. That's what they say was being said. Who knows what the truth is. But the fact is, when we got there, they had not been confirmed. And these confirmations are just now cycling through the system. They may be almost coming to an end, almost. And this is 18 months into our term. So the point I'm making is that this is not a very quick or dynamic process. And I invite the leader of the opposition, if he wishes, to come and see the state of the offices that the public service actually occupies. I did a tour myself. There are files everywhere. It's a fire hazard. There are so many files. You can't find anything. It's stacked up to the roof. It needs to be put in a new building, and thankfully that we're working on as well. But the working conditions of those who work for the public service are simply not the best, let me put it that way. And the same thing applies to the Public Service Commission that's been working part-time up to now. We have decided this year that they should really come on full-time to try and see if we can get through this huge backlog. For example, we learned that there was not a general assessment done for 8 years. 8 years. So people have been stuck in these jobs like clerk, assistant clerk, executive officers, those people below the level of first assistant secretary. And nothing was done to assess them so that they could go to the next stages in their careers. And this would mean thousands of people across the system, to the point where a request was made of the cabinet to change the policy to obviate on a one-off situation the need for an assessment test or an assessment exercise to be done requiring you to sit various courses just on a one-off basis to get through this. Otherwise, we would never get through the backlog. It is the most fascinating thing for me that this huge backlog, and we have to find some way to get on top of it because it affects morale in the public service. You have, for example, I know the Foreign Service best, people who are trainee administrative cadets actually acting in positions of executive authority at the level of Deputy High Commissioner, simply because the system hasn't caught up with where they're supposed to be administratively. So this is a problem, and I must say that the minister has really attacked this with aplomb. She's put together a great team, and we're moving forward. So in terms of my attitude, my colleagues know about budgets, though, is I tend to be not very respectful, let me put it that way. I'm an old man, so I'm entitled to these things. So my view is that the government lays out what its plans are when it came to office in the blueprint. And I had a discussion with the people at finance, and I said simply this: do you have the resources to provide the support for the government's programs? And all I needed to hear was, yes, we have the resources to do so. After that, I'm off to work. And whatever resources the Ministry of Finance supplies to us, the ministry uses them to the best of its ability. And if the resources are not available, if we have to cut back, then you cut back. But the ministry has been provided, in my view, with the resources to support the work. Over year on year, we've had an increase of approximately $7 million in funding over last year's subventions. And largely, these have to do with the fact that the Prime Minister has laid out for us this mandate, that the number one foreign policy matter for the Bahamas in the international sphere is climate change, because climate change is existential for our country. And the only way to combat this is to expand our reach across the world so that at every opportunity, the voice of the Bahamas can be heard saying, climate change, climate change, climate change. And that's what he has been doing. He's led the team with this, and all of us follow and support that issue. And it's been really an honor to watch this unfold at work, to see the respect which the country has engendered as a result of the work which has been put into this issue of climate change. You will note, Madam Speaker, that the Vice President of the United States is to visit the Bahamas officially tomorrow, and will be here for several hours before returning to Washington, D.C. I think apart from the visit of Condi Rice here when I was last minister, the previous high-level visit to this country was probably Jack Kennedy in 1962, at the very top of the executive, and I'm told he stayed here for 7 days. So this is now a vice presidential visit, and unfortunately there's not going to be an interface with the public at this time because it is really a multilateral meeting, because the Bahamas is chair of CARICOM, and so this is the site for the meeting. The meetings will be held at Atlantis. And all countries of the Caribbean, of the CARICOM area, will be bringing in representatives at the heads of government level, with 1 or 2 exceptions. And also coming in will be the president of the Dominican Republic. And that meeting will take place tomorrow. And amongst the items, again, first is climate change, the question of national security, the question of food security. Those are 3 important issues on the multilateral level. And then for the region, one of the most important issues is the question of what is happening in Haiti. And I'll come to Haiti in a second. This is a process which began at the Summit of Americas last year in Los Angeles. At that summit, the heads of government of CARICOM and the Dominican Republic requested a meeting with President Biden. And at the meeting, they discussed what they felt was a lukewarm engagement by the United States with this region. The criticism always is that the United States is only interested in security issues, not any other developmental issues. And so the prime ministers and president asked for this meeting so that the US would engage on matters beyond security matters. In other words, drug interdiction, people smuggling, those issues. Developmental issues are key to our sector. One of them, of course, is food security. The other is the question of financing for development, which keys into the whole issue of climate change. Financing for development is an important topic because we know that one of the reasons, as I said, in designing the budget the way it is because we need, as a country, the credit space because of our level of GDP per capita. No one's going to come to our rescue if something happens. We have to go to the markets and we have to find the money ourselves. And the question is, how much is that money going to cost? And if you don't get concessionary rates because of GDP per capita, then you're paying more than you should pay. So we've been trying to talk about another aspect of looking at how you provide loans to countries like ours. And that is the vulnerability index, to say that countries that have and face these external shocks, like hurricanes, and you know Grand Bahama has been hit in the last decade 4, 5, 6 times by hurricanes. So when you're in that position, even though your GDP per capita is at a certain level, the view is that you ought to get concessionary financing to deal with these things of protection, that is mitigation and defense, adaptation to the severity of these storms that are occurring. And so that's going to be one of the topics in the multilateral forum. There'll also be an opportunity for a bilateral forum, which will be Prime Minister and Vice President speaking together about the issues which the Bahamas is interested in. And we are, of course, interested in pre-clearance returning to Grand Bahama. We're interested, of course, in the continued security cooperation, and we're interested in the green climate initiative, which affects our shipping sector. And you know, my favorite hobby horse is the whole question of the United States and their visa policies for Bahamians. This is still a vexing problem, as far as I'm concerned. It's an irritant in the relationship, in the sense that, according to their stats, the last I checked, the rejection rate of Bahamians applying for visas to the United States is just somewhere over 8%. So 92% of the people, they say, get through the system. The problem is those in the 8% complain bitterly about the way they're treated when they go to the embassy by people and the way they're spoken to. And of course, that the rejections often on the face of it don't make sense. There is a particular rubric that they use in their law called 2141B. And that is a general thing which says you don't have sufficient ties to the Bahamas, and so therefore on that basis we are rejecting. Now I've told Bahamians who complained to me, number one is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Bahamas government, has no influence, I repeat, no influence over the granting of US visas, none whatsoever. Two, the American authorities say that even they cannot instruct a consular officer what to do in whether to grant or not grant a visa. Number three, their law gives a subjective right or power to the consular officer, not an objective right, a subjective right to say yes or no to a visa. So these are difficult things to overcome. There are also quite strict laws with regard to if you are suspected of being involved in any kind of criminal activity or if you've overstayed your time in the United States. And I just say as a matter of caution, because people often ask us about their rules. I'm not an expert on their rules, but it is their country, not our country, number one. Number two, it's an easy country to migrate to. It's not a difficult country to migrate to. So if you want to migrate to the United States permanently, there are legal avenues for you to do so. Number three, do not overstay your time in the United States. Don't, because that is often fatal to your being able to obtain a visa going to the United States. So I just say those as words of caution. But we welcome the visit to our country by the Vice President, and I'm sure that the Prime Minister will adequately put the case for CARICOM and will put the case for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas during the visit. This is his second interface with her, and I think that there ought to be a regular and continuing conversation with the United States. They are our largest trading partner. They are the most powerful cultural and economic influence on the Bahamas. We are joined at the hip, so we have no choice in the matter but to engage. I say that we have similar interests, not the same. So we have similar interests, but not the same. And one of our interests, of course, is that we believe in freedom of speech, of democracy, of the rule of law, and all that is attendant with those things. But even the former Governor General, when he was welcoming the South Korean ambassador, the Honorable Arthur Hanna, to the Bahamas once, he said to him, you know, South Korea and the Bahamas have much in common. We're both nestled next to giants, and we're only as independent as the giants allow. So even in that space, however, there's enough for us to cut our own path and to make our voices heard. Pope John Paul II used to always remind us that every culture, all people, have a right to exist, which is intrinsic to them. Had nothing to do with whether you got power or riches or what color you are and all the rest of it. You have a right to exist. And so long as you have your voice, this government, so long as we have our voices, we are going to use it for and on behalf of the Bahamian public, no matter who comes, no matter who comes. The second issue that will be raised, both in the multilateral and in the bilateral context, will be the situation in Haiti. We expect, Madam Speaker, in the next few days, for a meeting to be convened in in Kingston, Jamaica, which will bring together, we hope, the government with stakeholders from Haiti in the opposition, led by 3 former prime ministers that these men are engaged under the rubric, the Eminent Persons Group. And these 3 men are Dr. Kenny Anthony, who is the former Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Right Honorable Perry Christie, who is the former Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Bahamas, and Honorable Bruce Golding, who is the former Prime Minister of Jamaica. And it will be their responsibility to use their good offices and the good offices of CARICOM to see whether or not we can map a way forward for a political settlement in Haiti, which will allow for general elections to be held in that country, free and fair, in an atmosphere of security. The Prime Minister had made this one of the matters which he wanted to address before handing off his chairmanship to the next Prime Minister, who will be the Prime Minister of Dominica, Roosevelt Skerrit, when that transfer takes place on the 1st of July in Trinidad. And on the 4th of July 2023, we will be celebrating 50 years of CARICOM, the founding of CARICOM. And even though Dominica is going to be the chair, the Trinidadians have asked for the meeting to take place in Trinidad because that's where the Treaty of Chaguaramas was actually signed in 1973. So we'll be meeting in Trinidad, and the chair will be, the Prime Minister of the Bahamas will be handing off to the Prime Minister of Dominica. And in that meeting, in Kingston, Madam Speaker, we're hoping to be able to map some way forward. The issue always is not to try and impose any solution on Haiti. This has to be a Haitian-led solution because, first of all, it's their country and they have to decide what happens there. Secondly, you wouldn't want people to impose a solution on us. Thirdly, there is always a resistance in Haiti to people who see outsiders from coming outside their country and trying to impose a solution. So I really hope that the exercise in Kingston is successful because Lord knows that country has really suffered so much. I mean, they just had another earthquake, hundreds of people injured or killed in the midst of a governmental crisis, which included in the last 5 years their president being assassinated. This budget, Madam Speaker, also reflects something which is philosophical for me. And it has to do with the work of members of parliament. I have been delayed by a fluxion of time in properly addressing the need for a parliamentary service bill to flesh out the rules and regulations for the Management and Budget Committee of the House, both of which should lead to the separation of the House of Assembly and its dependence on the executive for the execution of its work. So there is work coming on this issue. And just using the men's room a couple of minutes ago, I was reminded of how Milo Butler was locked up in the bathroom when they didn't want him to come upstairs to speak. So I kept checking the locks to make sure that I could get out in time for the 4 o'clock start of the meeting. Just joking. I reminded myself also of so I was really just contemplating the inadequacy of the building that we're in. I was reminded there was a female minister was telling me that she went down to another public building, and as she was using the stall in the public building, a lady who was sitting next to her pulled her gown under the stall and said, "Could you help me? I've been trying to get a hold of you for some time." But this is how inadequate our public buildings are. Certainly, we've outlived this building. 1815 is a long time. Many, many generations have come by, and it's now time for our own generations to put our imprimatur on this. So that is something which we're still working on, and hope within the next year to be able to provide members of the committee with some drafts to deal with. But what I said at the start of the term in 2021 is that there is a need to empower incumbents in their work. The amount of discretionary spending which is demanded of incumbent members of parliament. I've had a long time at this now, since 1992, and I think that I have never experienced in my public life the level of demands from constituents with regard to discretionary spending. I've never experienced this. This is incredible. And I've tried to figure out what's actually going on, the frantic nature of the requests. And I just go back perhaps to the study by the central bank in 2018, when they said that people in this country who make $30,000 a year or less are unable to make ends meet. 50% of them reported that they could not make ends meet at the end of the month. And it has gotten worse, Madam Speaker, because it seems to me, I know people say that crime and immigration are issues which concern them, but it seems to me right now that inflation has got to be the #1 issue that's affecting people, because the cost of everything has become more expensive. So the need for discretionary spending and the reliance on the social services systems is becoming more acute, even as the economy rebounds. One of the things I thought, therefore, would help members of parliament is to allow for the $3,500 for the office accommodation, and which is now $2,500, and $100,000, which is a capital grant to go up to $150,000. Left to me, it'd be $1 million, but it ain't up to me. And what I wanted to argue is this: this is not new money. This is not new money. This is not additional money. My argument is that if I want to dig a well, as I recently, because there's a flooding problem in Fox Hill. So I had a contractor come and price what it would cost to dig a well. The price for digging a well is $15,000. Now, normally what you would do is you would go to the Ministry of Works and say, I need a well here, I need a well there, I need a well there. But the Ministry of Works has to have things budgeted. It has to be in their program of work. So unless it's an absolute emergency, there's a lot of bureaucracy before the Ministry of Works can actually kick into gear. My argument is that a member of parliament ought to be able to direct that spending if he needs a capital project done within his constituency. So what you do is the allocations that would normally fall, for example, for the Ministry of Works, some of that can be transferred over to the direction of the member of parliament. And by that means be able to fix the demands that people have on members of parliament for various matters. To clear out a well, for example, costs $2,500. So given the level of what you've got available to you, it's gone, no matter, because, and then what is also important is the level of social spending that you have to do. The bands that you have to support, the public schools that you have to support, and the various work that they do. So by the time you look around, the capital grant has disappeared. And I'm saying that this may help in a small way to try and improve that situation for members of parliament. And members of parliament have a very important job to do in trying to keep the government connected to the people who they govern, but also in making sure that the peace is kept in their communities, and also making sure that the infrastructure in their communities is up to standard and up to scratch. And the citizens of the country, in terms of the level of public education, see no distinction, it appears, between public monies and your own personal monies. I was in opposition at the time, and there was a problem with the track around one of the parks in Fox Hill. And so my response when I was asked, well, to help with fixing it, I said, well, I will approach the Ministry of Works with regard to getting it repaired. And the constituent's reply was, you're a millionaire, you can fix it yourself. And that's very often the attitude. The attitude is the member of parliament can just go in his pocket and fix it. But of course, that's not the case. The case is that most of us are men and women of ordinary means, and that you have to, I'm sorry? It is, most of us are. But you have to apply yourself in the judicious use of public funds to meet the greater demands of the Bahamian public. Speaker, I'd like now to turn to an issue which is in the public domain. And it again appears in the newspapers here this morning. The Prime Minister, in his budget statement, made a statement about matters in Grand Bahama. And he said that it is time for decisive action. For the second time in my experience in this term, an investor has decided that somehow that throws down the gauntlet in public, which requires them to take issue with the government publicly over a matter involving their investment. Even though each investor, as far as I know, understands that the Prime Minister has an open door policy, and given the level of investment, it's possible for you to simply pick up the phone and say X, Y, or Z. But be that as it may, free country, so you approach whatever you want with your investment, so on and so forth. The first example was Atlantis, who decided that they were going to publicly throw down the gauntlet in the face of the Bahamas government over the decision on RCL. And now, with regard to the decision on the Grand Bahama Port Authority, one of the shareholders has decided, well, first of all, there was an announcement from the Grand Bahama Port Authority, which made various statements about the state of investment. And then one of the owners is now in the newspaper this morning saying what he will and will not do with regard to the Grand Bahama Port Authority. Now, you remember or recall from history, 1969. The then Prime Minister of the country was Lyndon Pindling, and there was a social problem of social and racial discrimination in Grand Bahama, and the exclusion of Bahamians from the mainstream of the economy in Grand Bahama. And he went up there at the opening of Borco in 1969, and he said that if the social order did not bend, it would have to break. That caused a rift in his own party. And shortly after that, there was a split in the Progressive Liberal Party. But the result of the speech was the full Bahamianization of the city of Freeport. And the benefits of being Bahamian and being in Freeport grew exponentially for Bahamians following that address. The agreement, the Hawksbill Creek Agreement, was signed in 1955 and enshrined in the statute law of the Bahamas. There were a set of mutual promises in this agreement, one of which was to build certain infrastructural projects, to maintain the city, to promote investment in the city. And for some time now, people have watched with alarm as the storms have come, true, but it just seems as if assets were being dumped, and there just didn't seem to be any new investment coming into the country. And there's a lot of pressure on the ground in Grand Bahama itself for the government to do something to act. In fact, I read the response of the leader of the opposition to the Prime Minister's statement, as quoted in the Tribune anyway. And he said that he too was concerned about Grand Bahama Port Authority and its performance, but he did not agree that the government should own the Grand Bahama Port Authority, if I'm quoting it correctly. So that there is this difference of opinion on what to do. But both sides agree, I would say, that something needs to be done, because you have a city which is built for 250,000 people, sitting there with all of this infrastructure and potential for development. And if you go to North Eleuthera, you can't get a parking space on New Year's. But Grand Bahama, 10 times larger than North Eleuthera, the airport is empty. And you ask yourself how a shareholder can expect for there to be change when the airport gets ruined by the storm, the investors decide not to do anything to fix it, they offload it on the government for $1. So that's gone. Then the hotel, that's offloaded on the government, so that's gone. I just walked through Port Lucayo. They agree that the tourism product is up, but they say there's no promotion going on in Port Lucayo, so the lady says, I'm starving here. She says something 4,500 tourists came last week. Not one came here. And, I'm dying on the vine here. My sons, who used to take care of the bills, can't. I don't want them to be forced into criminality. But who is responsible for investment, attracting investment to the city? Who is responsible for the infrastructure under the Hawksbill Creek Agreement? And then there is this substratum that's going on, this fear that's going around, that, if the government takes over in Freeport, Freeport is going to collapse, or it's not going to operate properly. So that's the subtext which is going along. Not knowing that, in fact, the government has been carrying Freeport and the responsibilities of the Grand Bahama Port Authority for at least 10 years, if not more. If not more. There's an agreement between the two sides. The government is supposed to provide services to the city, and the Grand Bahama Port Authority is supposed to pay the government back for those services. There's a bill outstanding now on that matter. So it's not as if, but I'm not sure I have permission to say any of that, but I'm just saying generally that's the issue. So when I saw the statement this morning in the newspaper, I'm saying to myself, why would you want to join issue with this? Why would you join issue with this in the public? Why would you do so when the evidence is there to see on the ground what is actually happening in Grand Bahama? In fact, one of my colleagues called up this morning and said, ask them publicly when you speak about this, since they no longer have the airport, since they've gotten rid of the power company. So they're going to get rid of the roads next and give them to us for $1? Is that what they're going to do next? The roads in Grand Bahama? The roads in Grand Bahama were some of the finest roads in this country, right? As a matter of fact, when the young kids I sponsored from Doris Johnson went up to Grand Bahama. None of them had been to Freeport before. And they thought they were in Miami. They said, oh, we're in Miami. We didn't know this existed up here. But everywhere you look now, the roads are deteriorating, falling into holes. I thought it was laughable, forgive me for saying so, I thought it was laughable for them to call a press conference when I'm advised by the Ministry of Works that it cost $1 million a mile to pave a road in the Bahamas, $1 million a mile to pave a road in the Bahamas. And they are going to spend, they are boasting about spending the princely sum of $600,000 in Grand Bahama to fix the roads. Are you kidding me?
They collect service charge fee.
Yes, right, I'm saying. The government's, the minister says $6 million was spent by the government fixing the roads out in East Grand Bahama, right? And the Grand Bahama Port Authority is boasting about $600,000 in Freeport. I mean, come on. You know, and service charges are collected which support this enterprise. So the Minister for Grand Bahama did a special program, 2021. The government's resources put $9 million into help clean up Freeport. Whose responsibility was it to clean up Freeport after the storm? The government or the Grand Bahama Port Authority? I mean, it seems clear as day. If you go now, because I just did a walk in the Bahama area, there's still hurricane debris piled up on the side of the roads in Freeport. And now you want to get into a public row about whether we should move forward on this or not. Well, all we are saying, it's a minimalist argument. We're simply saying, you have an agreement. It's called the Hawksbill Creek Agreement. All we're saying is, if that's the agreement, follow the agreement. Nothing more, nothing less. We don't ask you to do anything religious or, you know, acts of the deity. All we're asking you to do is follow the agreement. If you're supposed to be promoting investment in Freeport, then promote investment. If you're supposed to be putting infrastructure in Grand Bahama and supporting it, then put the infrastructure. But the Bahamas government is putting the hospital. The Bahamas government is going to fix the airport, right? And I don't know, what else are we going to do there? I mean, so many things we have to do because these are Bahamians who are up there, Open the hotel. Yes, right, the hotel. I forgot that. You got to open the hotel. You got to open the hotel. Yeah. You know, and it ain't got nothing to do with politics, because, you know, some of our own supporters say, man, there's vote F&M up there, so what you putting money in there for? I tell them, you know, first of all, your F&M today, your PLP tomorrow. That's number one. And I can try to get as many as them to do that. No, no. I said what I wanted to say. Your F&M today, your PLP tomorrow. Right. So that's number one. Yeah. Number two is, and the same thing goes for Long Island. You know, first of all, everybody in Grand Bahama got family in Nassau. And if you mistreat their family up in Grand Bahama or in Long Island, even though they're PLP in Nassau, they say, you're treating my family bad. You got to do something to help my family. That's number two. Number three. The PLPs who are in Grand Bahama and in Long Island, some of them can move to Nassau. And you don't want them converting to F&M while they're up there. You know, it's like I say, you know, you got to save them. So I got to keep mine, right? I got to keep mine. I got to keep mine. I got to keep mine. You know, I tell you, my eyes are always on 2026. You know, these people who are rowing about this and that, 2026, that's the, yeah. No, they're with me. I'm only telling you, you know, when you see me in Marco City, what I do it. Just in case you miss, the message, I only tell you what I do it. And maybe I shouldn't. I shouldn't. No, I wouldn't be wearing red tennis, I can assure you. No, I wouldn't be. I'd be wearing gold tennis. But Madam Speaker, I mean, the serious point is that they're Bahamians in Grand Bahama, and the government has to act to assist. And so what I wanted to say is, in case there is any doubt, as the person who is seconding this motion, that the cabinet of the Bahamas is 1,000% behind the Prime Minister of the Bahamas on this issue. And I hope Mr. Haywood takes note. I hope so. Because it's more than just investment and all the rest of it. The Grand Bahama Freeport is a public good. It's not a plaything. It's not for cocktail money. Real people live there. Real development takes place. People's lives are being affected. People have put their stakes down in that city. It's a Bahamian city, and we are going to support it and help to ensure that it succeeds. So, those are the thoughts which I have today. I've said that when you examine a budget, Madam Speaker, you can look at it in many ways. You can say it's a balanced budget, you know, we're doing a good job with the deficit, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, how does it affect people? And I think that we've more than amply demonstrated the case that the figures are there to support the Bahamian people and the Bahamian public. So, for example, the expenditure in foreign affairs. What I found in this term is that Bahamians are more traveled than at any previous time that I've been in office. So you will find that Bahamians are as far afield as the Antipodes, or in Russia, or in the Middle East, or in the Far East, or in the Americas, including Latin America. And every once in a while, you will run into some request or other from a Bahamian who is marooned or stuck or has lost a passport or some other misfortune while they're overseas. And the question always is there a Bahamian representative in that country? So we have embarked on a program to try and be sure that in the 192 countries of the world, there is at least one Bahamian representative in every one of those countries. Now that's a very ambitious thing. They can't be professional diplomats, so we are expanding the system of honorary consuls, but at the same time, we're seeking to beef up those diplomatic offices overseas. So you will note that in Toronto, there's now a consul general for the first time, and sadly, the inaugural consul general died within 2 weeks of his appointment. But shortly, the Prime Minister will announce a new appointment. We have also decided to put a consulate, which will twin with the tourism office as it does in Toronto, in Los Angeles, because of the Bahamian community in Los Angeles. And I see where JetBlue just announced in the last few days that they will be having a direct flight from Los Angeles here to and you know, the very curious thing about that is people think that if you're in Los Angeles, that it is quicker to go to Hawaii than it is to go to Nassau. But in terms of flying time, it is exactly the same. 5 hours to Hawaii from Los Angeles, 5 hours to Nassau from Los Angeles. So there's a great marketing potential there. You can come to Nassau instead of going to Hawaii. So I hope that that succeeds. And just recently, our ambassador to Kuwait, who is Turan Maki, just presented his credentials to the Emir of Kuwait. And I want to congratulate him on that. And also congratulate Anthony Ferguson, who is now the High Commissioner to New Zealand, who presented his letters of credence to the Prime Minister of New Zealand last week. So this is all part of a plan to try and get Bahamian presence far afield. And of course, the Commonwealth meeting is going to take place in Samoa in next year or year after next. And so New Zealand, of course, is an important stepping stone on the way to Samoa. And of course, Samoa has similarities with us on the climate change issue. We also are planning to upgrade the office in Jamaica. We are awaiting the decision of the Jamaican government about the appointment of a consul general in Jamaica. Right now, we've been using an honorary consul, and we think that given the level of Bahamians, the number of Bahamians in Jamaica, and the demands on the office, that it's reached a point where we actually need professional diplomats to go there. Similarly, for Trinidad and Tobago, there's a plan to upgrade the office there from honorary consul to consul general. So these are areas that we're trying to focus on growth. It was my plan before leaving office the last time that when we established honorary consulates in Houston, in Denver, and in Chicago, that these would, over the years, bump themselves up to have formal diplomats. And I want to pay, say thanks and respects to Michael Fountain, who is our honorary consul in Chicago, who's really doing an excellent job as an honorary consul in gathering the Bahamian community there and making sure that that community is a success. He just put on an official visit for Ambassador Wendell Jones, who is our ambassador to Washington, D.C., just last week. And we're hoping that Prime Minister Davis will be making an official visit to Chicago in the fall to help promote business and cultural ties between the two countries. Of course, the busiest office is Miami, where the largest accumulation of Bahamians live. So that office has been has had to have additional staff to deal with the issues related to the office. So the last point I would make on the question of relations is the question of relationship with the Chinese government and the fact that there is this situation, I'll put it, with regard to relations with China and relations with the United States. We take the position that we still support the One China policy. We also take the position that we are friends of all. That's what Lyndon Pindling said when he went to the United Nations. We have no enemies. We are friends of all. And we maintain that position. We do not believe that this is a staging ground for China for hegemonic designs on this region or for encroachments into the United States, and neither would we be a party to any such design or encroachment. The Chinese have been good development partners for us, and we think that going forward they will continue to be. But we will continue, of course, to watch the situation. So I hope that as the year ensues, the budget performs as we expect it to perform. And I'm hoping that all the small contractors who've been calling, member for Mount Moriah, you'll be able to fulfill their needs. The number one thing is I need one contract every morning. But the serious point being that this is a mechanism to assist and help people who need the help and support. I'm, again, only left to say, to express my deep gratitude for being able, for the third time, to be Foreign Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. There is still, Madam President, an aha factor with regard to the Bahamas every time I cross a border. And I run into some customs officer or immigration officer, and he sees the Bahamian passport, and he says, Bahamas, aha. So we still have that response, a very good response. So thank you to the people of Fox Hill for allowing this opportunity. I support the budget. I'm pleased to second the motion, and I congratulate the Prime Minister on putting together the best deal ever, a focused budget for people. Thank you.
Yes, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act for the appropriation of diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas on revenue account for the financial year commencing 1st of July 2023 and ending 30th of June 2024. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is a privilege and an honor to stand in this honorable house and to be at least the lead speaker for this year's budget exercise. Madam Speaker, before I get into the substantive presentation, there were just a couple of things that I would wish to clarify and also mention. First, I want to just bring condolences on behalf of myself and the rest of the constituency for the loss of Patrice Rowe, who was a team member of ours who passed away recently from cancer. Madam Speaker, I heard the Prime Minister's remarks earlier this morning, and that I got some information from the former Minister of Education. And the former Minister of Education said that our government spent $39 million on school repairs, over $26 million on school repairs in the Providence, and over $6 million in school repairs in Grand Bahama. In Grand Bahama, I can particularly attest to having seen post-Dorian the most repairs that had taken place, I believe, in a very, very long time. In fact, it wasn't ordinary repairs because obviously those schools had been severely affected, and so this government had spent millions of dollars on repairing them. As well as, sometimes, Madam Speaker, the other side trivializes what we went through in COVID and the lockdowns and curfews. They speak about it in a very, what I would call a very flippant manner. But imposing a constitutional lockdown or a constitutional curfew was a very serious matter at that time. And the fact that you had to do it, one, was done based on medical recommendations, and two, it actually saved thousands of lives. So we cannot just trivialize it by saying, these things have happened and there's no effect of it and so on. Madam Speaker, I also was particularly disappointed in a comment or what was said to be a question that the Prime Minister spoke about. I know he clarified it and he said it was a question, but it was particularly disappointing that one would speak or ask a question which, as the Minister of Finance, you would actually know the answer to this. That you would speak and ask a question in a way to assert that such a thing would have happened. And that is the question with respect to these credit cards for cabinet ministers' spouses. That really, I think, was punching below the belt. And as a statesman, I would have expected that one would not have gone to the length of speaking about anyone in this House spouses. And so that particularly was very, very disappointing. Madam Speaker, this year we celebrate 50 years of independence.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for West Cranbourne and Bimini.
And of course, we don't intend to interrupt at all. But just for the record, though, there are two things. First of all, I think it's important for us to point out that at no time does this side trivialize the lockdowns or what had to be done, and we truly, and we also accept the recommendations that came from the professionals. At no time are we trivializing that work and the fact that many lives were in fact saved. But secondly, insofar as the spouse is concerned, I think the Prime Minister this morning, when he raised the question, the truth is, we must remember there was an increase in what was given spouses and provided for spouses on trips. There was. That didn't exist before. That never existed before.
How many times has spouse been on
That never existed before.
It's a different
But it
point.
is a question.
It's a totally different
It is a
point.
point. It is a point, Madam Speaker. Just for the record, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honourable member. You may continue, honourable member.
Yes, then I think now you really muddied the water.
Of course.
Now you really sort of muddied it.
But our spouses.
Because the point that you raised is a completely different point. The point that you raised, or the point that the Prime Minister spoke about, was a point about giving members' wives credit cards.
Of course, yes.
Which is absolute nonsense that you would give any member. In fact, it's absolute nonsense because as a cabinet minister, I never had a credit card. So why would my spouse have a credit card? It makes absolutely no sense to even ask that kind of a question, Madam Speaker. But Madam Speaker, this is the year we celebrate. It is the year we celebrate 50th anniversary. So I've got, as the member for Exuma said, I've gotten that off my chest. And it is not just a year to celebrate, but this is really a defining moment for us as a nation. This budget should have been just as ambitious, just as bold, just as transformative as the Bahamian spirit has been over the last 50 years. The reality is, while the public purse has recovered, families, ordinary mothers and fathers, ordinary young people who are coming out of school, small businesses, they continue to suffer. The member for Fox Hill asked the question that he's never seen so much requests coming. Well, the requests are coming because people are still suffering. The requests are coming not because any different circumstance, but they are coming because of the situations that they face. Bahamians don't want to come to members of parliament. They come to us because they need to come to members of parliament because of the circumstances that they are facing. The Prime Minister spoke for 2 hours last time, another 2 hours this morning, but failed to even mention the new sugar tax, failed to give details on NIB, failed to speak about the boat registration, failed to speak about the increased harbor dues, failed to speak about the the new hotel condo tax, failed to speak about the real property tax, and failed to speak about that. Sadly, this budget does not provide any assistance for the national contentment or security. It doesn't address those things at all and treats the private sector with contempt and disdain. Unfortunately, this budget is still out of touch with the everyday challenges that Bahamians are facing. The budget lacks the vision to mitigate the severe effects of inflation, and this was again spoken by the member for Vauxhall. Member for Vauxhall said, crime may be a difficulty, but he believes that inflation is the most serious thing. Well, I agree with him that inflation is one of the most serious things, and this budget fails to address inflation. Does nothing to reduce the high unemployment. It is void of ideas to advance the ease of doing business and digitization, and makes it more and more expensive and difficult to do business. This is not, and I stress not, a budget for the people. Madam Speaker, the PLP government has been nothing but consistent. If anything, they've been consistent. They have been consistent lawbreakers. There is one law for them and another law for everyone else. And this budget is no different. They are consistent in breaching the Central Bank Act and had to come to Parliament to clean up the illegal loan that was provided by Central Bank. They consistently breached the Procurement Act. Yes. They did not follow the Procurement Act in the bidding process or in the process of choosing someone for the proposed new prison. A new prison that has increased in cost without what I say is sufficient explanation. They do not provide details of contracts awarded, and they have not produced the required annual report on all procurement activities. All of this is lined up, not just in the previous Procurement Act, but in the one they passed. It is in the one that they passed, which they, again, have refused to follow. They are consistent lawbreakers. They have been consistent when they breach their own Public Financial Management Act by not submitting the legally required reports from the Fiscal Responsibility Council. Remember the Fiscal Responsibility Council? There are now 3 reports that the council has not submitted. In fact, we do not even know the composition of the Fiscal Responsibility Council after it was reported that the chairman demitted office. They are not serious, Madam Speaker. They are not serious about this watchdog council. And our entire system will suffer because of it. And now, in this budget process, they are attempting to create a special fund whose process, I say, does not comply with the law or the Constitution. Now, I did hear the Prime Minister not in this place, but in another place, speak about the proposed sugar tax. But his statement only adds to the confusion about the situation.
Yes.
Why would you submit legislation that would allow the Prime Minister to unilaterally create or to put in place tax measures, and then the Prime Minister then, not in this place, where he should have said it, but in another place, say, well, don't worry about that. That ain't gonna happen right now.
Yep.
Well, if it's not gonna happen right now, why don't you withdraw the legislation today? I challenge them to withdraw it today. Quite frankly, we just don't believe you. You said there was no new taxes, but yet there are taxes and there are fees. You said that you would reduce crime, but the fear of crime, I believe, is at an all-time high. You said that you would provide funding for small businesses to the tune of $50 million, but you have not. You said that you would reduce the cost of electricity.
It's going up.
The cost of electricity has actually gone up, as opposed to them reducing the cost of electricity. People, unfortunately, just do not believe this government. Madam Speaker, the Public Financial Management Immigration Levy Fund Bill, which was tabled, it does create a special fund. Now, this fund seeks to collect revenue derived from levies or taxes that are paid from under the Immigration Act and that are also paid under customs. I want you to get this, Madam Speaker, because what this piece of legislation does, I believe the PLP has a fundamental challenge with this levy as it is presented. We take strong issue with the amendments to the Immigration Act and the Customs Management Act that seek to delegate taxation powers down to the minister. How can we in this House agree to give a minister the ability to tax without knowing what the amount of tax is? How could we agree to delegate that to a minister when we don't know who will have to pay this tax? How could we agree to give this and delegate this over to a minister when we don't even know what items will be taxed? The amendments would allow for the minister to unilaterally establish and set these mandatory rates and levies to be charged to taxpayers. Why would we give the minister the ability to set any rate on any item in any circumstance? Why would we even agree to do that? When this is the place where you should be presenting what should be taxed, why it should be taxed, and you should be justifying those things to the public. The entire premise, Madam Speaker, of every democracy is that there is no taxation without representation. It is only in this House, through the elected representatives of the people, through Parliament, who can give the right to establish and change taxes and fees to be deployed to defray the central government's expenses. The budget speech and the Prime Minister's contribution today had absolutely no mention of any possible sugar tax or wellness tax. Yet the government is still proposing to move forward with an amendment to the Customs Management Act that would delegate these to the Prime Minister or delegate these to the Minister of Finance with the ability to levy any amount on any item without first seeking parliamentary approval. Madam Speaker, this is simply unheard of. Madam Speaker, can we even trust, and I move to the deficit now, can we even trust the government's deficit figure? You know, we all remember the deficit debacle. You know, I misspoke. It was the speechwriter's issue, the speechwriter's fault, last budget communication. The Prime Minister stated that he expects to beat this year's deficit by almost $50 million. But will he really beat this year's deficit by $50 million? We fail to see where the Prime Minister included the $110 million loan to BPL. Now, he is legally obligated to put this in the budget under the law. That if the government is going to loan monies to a state-owned enterprise, they can only loan that money if it is appropriated in the budget and it is shown in the budget. It is a loan. It is a loan under your debt management plan. It is in your debt management plan where $110 million goes. And yeah, you may not have known.
No, you know better.
You're not in this.
You know better.
Where your financial secretary confirmed to the press that yes, we indeed loaned $110 million to BPL.
Yeah, they understand.
Honorable member for East Grand Bahama, are you yielding? Thank you, sir. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Tall Pines.
I didn't want to because I was out there having a meeting and came in when the member for East Grand Bahama spoke about the Customs Management Amendment Bill 2023. And he was referring to the amendment of Section 354 of the Principal Act, which speaks specifically to the minister may, after consultation with the Minister of Health, make regulations providing for the payment of health and wellness levy for the imported specified goods and domestically manufactured goods. Madam Speaker, when this was laid, I did receive a call from the various news dailies about what does this really mean. And for the last year, I spoke specifically about the need to look at potential levy with certain foods that have been implicated with chronic non-communicable diseases. I made a statement indicating that the Ministry of Health and Wellness, based on recommendations from PAHO and WHO, were looking at the possibility of putting deterrent tax on sugar-sweetened beverages, industrial-produced trans fats, to eliminate them out of the country, and to put a tax on naturally recurrent trans fats. In our STEP survey in 2019, it is clear that the health and wellness of our country is of urgent importance, and this particular amendment was a tax for deterrent. I made reference to it, and the Prime Minister made it very clear in the dailies that this tax is not to be implemented in this year's budget. No, let me finish. Let me finish. This bill allows us to go through the consultative process and the education process throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and speak to the various industries. But this is definitely something that is not going to happen in this budget cycle. So why are you bringing it as if it is a part of this cycle? No, it is no need to withdraw the bill. It is not in this budget. It is not in this budget cycle. That's what I want to clarify. So for him to make it appear to the Bahamian people that this tax... Let me finish. No, let me finish. There's no need to withdraw the bill. What letter? No. Listen here. Just as your Minister of Health,
Honorable members,
your Minister of
member.
Health, your Minister of Health in your last administration did the honorable thing to push for this particular, and I, as the Minister of Health, based on the domino theory that is taking place in the entire region, it is my responsibility. But I am only one voice around the table. The reality is, no, there's no need to withdraw this bill. This bill is to foreshadow what is potentially to come with the representation and consultation with the Bahamian people.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
After listening to the member for Tall Pines, I am even more opposed. I am even more opposed to this bill. We are even more opposed to this bill. Because what they are attempting to do is to put in place a mechanism where they can put in place a tax without first coming back to this house and telling the people what the tax is. So we don't support it.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Tall Pines.
Rest assured, and I can inform to the Bahamian people that no tax will come in place without consultation with the Bahamian people and consultation with the industry in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Yeah, okay then. Okay, when that time comes, we'll deal with it.
Let me say something. Let me say something.
GBPA voice.
Which is, you do not need legislation to consult. You could go and consult today. Why would you need a piece of legislation that gives you the power to do it just to talk to people?
You got that letter.
You could go and talk to people now.
You got that letter.
If they are not intending to proceed, they are not intending to proceed with this year, withdraw this bill and bring it back after your consultation. Bring it back after your consultation, and then let's debate it after your consultation. Because your consultation may actually come back and tell you, do not bother with this. But you would have already put in place the mechanism to collect it. We don't believe you. We don't believe you. We do not believe you. We don't believe you. We don't believe you.
Members, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for
They don't
Foxhill.
believe you either.
We see you.
So, this is not a point. I just wanted to let them know. There's a mechanism, though. I keep telling you that. There's a mechanism. Yeah, in the interpretation of general clauses I. Any order which comes here, first of all, if it's done by order, it's got to be laid here. And once it's laid here, you got 6 weeks to move a resolution to negative it. That's in the law now. So no issue.
Thank you very much.
You may continue on debate.
The member for Tall Pines has said
Let's debate it.
that they are laying this in order to consult. Well, unfortunately, oh, come on, man. Come on. Come on. That's what he said. Come on, man. Come on. That's what he said. That's what he said. You laying it so you can consult. That's what you said.
That's exactly what
That's what you said.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member.
That's what you said.
Member for Tall Pines.
Yes. The member is again misleading this House and the Bahamian people. We made it very clear, and I want to say it again. This particular bill is currently on the agenda as part of what we're doing. I want the Bahamian people to understand, and the members opposite to understand, that we are not going to proceed with the implementation of any tax as it relates to this bill without consultation to the Bahamian people and without consultation with the members of the opposition.
After consultation. Madam Speaker, I move on. But I coming back to this later on.
The wholesalers wrote you in. Wholesalers wrote you in.
Madam Speaker, on the $110 million loan to BVL.
I know.
On the $110 million loan. The Debt Management Act,
They call Cat Island.
sections 36 and 41, lay out the provisions for government lending to any entity. The Act also restricts lending that does not fall within those provisions. So you can't lend unless you fit within those provisions of the Debt Management Act. Most critically, Section 38(2) states that any lending must come from sums appropriated from Parliament. Those sums that are appropriated from Parliament are in this book. Madam Speaker, we call upon the government to indicate what appropriations were made by Parliament for this $110 million loan lending to BPL. If there is no appropriation for this lending, it is clearly and patently illegal. Or alternatively, the government will have to use the budgetary mechanisms to transfer funds already appropriated by Parliament into an appropriate line item to effect the loan. But the law is clear. In other words, the government will have to show this sum is in a budgetary expenditure. It must show the line item in the budget. And this, in fact, means that if there is an additional $110 million expense, it will blow the budget deficit wide open. Madam Speaker, the PLP has also presented what I would call an incomplete budget. Their own law gives specifically what should be included in this budget. The fourth schedule of their Public Financial Management Act 2023 states as follows: that the annual budget shall have estimates of financing, which financing information for the previous 2 years, both actual and budget, and projected financing for the current year, which is the year coming, and the next 3 years. So you should have information about your previous 2 years, your most current year, and the next 3 years you should have in your budget estimates. Well, clearly, Madam Speaker, the government's estimates only include the current year and the next 2 years. They are missing a year. To proceed, again, means that it is not in compliance with the law, and I would say the budget is incomplete. Madam Speaker, on inflation crisis, the central bank states the average domestic consumer price inflation, specifically average cost increased, recreation increased by 16.9%. The average inflation for food and non-alcoholic beverages increased by 13.4%. Restaurants and hotels increased by 11.4%. Health increased by 4.8%. Housing, water, gas, electricity all increased by 4.5%. The budget does nothing to mitigate the rising food prices. Not only did you not include any measures to assist persons with inflation, but you reduced the expenditure on certain heads in the social services budget. On page 136, you have reduced the heads for food assistance program by $1.3 million. You have reduced the subsistence support of persons by over $2.4 million. And your emergency desk assistance, that's when people who come and emergency and they need help, you've reduced that by over $2.1 million. Madam Speaker, this is a total of over $5.8 million you have reduced these heads by. Tell the people in East Grand Bahama that everyone got the help they needed. Tell them that the help they got was sufficient. Tell them that those who needed home repair, that everybody got help, those who needed. If you can't tell them that, why would you be reducing those heads? Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister then committed to a revised management policy that emphasized a much greater, and he spoke about this morning, a much greater Bahamian dollar borrowing, that we were borrowing more locally. That's what he said, that there's a policy now that they wanted to seek to borrow more locally. But alas, Madam Speaker, as is typical, the PLP says one thing and does another.
Yeah.
That's why we don't believe you. Would you believe, Madam Speaker, that despite bashing the F&M for its foreign borrowing, the vast majority of additional $1.1 billion in debt that the PLP government has taken on has been in foreign currency? Despite all the talk that they have come around there doing the very same thing that the F&M did.
Yeah.
In simple terms, Madam Speaker, the PLP has added $1.1 billion to the national debt since coming to take office. And of that, $900 million, or 82%, is foreign currency. Prime Minister Davis, in his October 27, 2021 communication to this place, that the government, in their supplemental budget, this is what he said. He said, unfortunately, with the visibly poor fiscal management, confidence of the Bahamian government weakened the international markets. And he spoke about our bonds. And our bonds are trading at a distressed level. That's what he said in October of 2021. Madam Speaker, what were the distress levels that the Prime Minister was referencing? At that time, in the midst of a pandemic, the 2021 bonds were trading at around 87 cents in the dollar. 87. If the Prime Minister concluded that poor fiscal management was the reason for the significantly discounted value of the bonds at that time, then what does he say when just only yesterday, June 6, 2023, the same bonds were trading at 75 cents to the dollar? When they came, it was 86. Now, it is 75. And they criticized us for it. They said it was because of our bad management. But now theirs is lower. Madam Speaker, you heard right, despite the fact that the Bahamian economy, despite the fact that the Bahamian economy has full strength, and despite all of the talk about on the other side of the record revenues, and despite the fact that the government engaged Rothschilds for an undisclosed $1 million contract that they refused to reveal to the Bahamian people, our bonds are trading in worse position today than they were in October of 2021, when the Prime Minister claimed that 87 cents at that time was due to fiscal mismanagement and by the previous administration. Madam Speaker, I move to Grand Bahama. Grand Bahama, Madam Speaker, I hear what the member for Fox Hill says, and some of what he says, we on this side have no difficulties with. Grand Bahama.
Some of it.
But Madam Speaker, the bottom line is Grand Bahama deserves better. Grand Bahama deserves better. The facts speak for themselves that 2022, the Grand Bahama economy had an economic decline of 9%, or $154 million. With no hurricanes, no COVID-19, but you had a worse decline, and I believe Grand Bahama has probably declined worse than any place else in the country. With no COVID and no hurricane, 9% decline. This is simply incredible. No Hurricane Dorian, no COVID-19, and yet you have declined by 9%.
3 PLP ministers live there. 3 PLP ministers live there.
We have heard about the airport project. We still have not yet seen any details about this project. We must ask, and I ask this genuinely, because, sip, sip is sip, sip. There's talk and stuff out there. But what amount of dredging is being proposed in the airport project? Dredging. what amount of dredging is being proposed in the airport project, and who will benefit from the removal of Bahamian resources. I leave that right there.
3 minutes, please.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma right now.
Was ranting and raving about a question being asked by another member, and he does the same thing. It is shameful, Madam Speaker.
Oh, now it's shameful. Okay,
Now shameful. The resources of any mining project, a property owned by the government, is the property of the government and shall always be the property of the government until there's some transaction. Otherwise, in this case, there is no such intended transaction.
Y'all don't disclose. We don't find it anyway. You don't disclose.
Thank you very much, member for Exuma.
Non-disclosure agreement.
Now we know that there is some dredging that is being proposed, but the government hasn't yet decided on where it should go. What I said was, now we understand that there is some proposed dredging there is dredging that is being proposed. The government will own it, and the government has not yet decided on who or what should happen to the dredging material. Yes, that's what I said. Yeah. Until you decide, because you haven't yet decided. Until you decide who it should go to.
You're in education, so don't worry about that.
Madam Speaker, the proposed, and I leave that there, because dredging in Grand Bahama is a very, very serious and very emotive undertaking. I leave that there. The proposed hospital, or should I say, the proposed clinic that is being proposed in Grand Bahama, that ground was broken for, again, I say failed to fulfill what is really needed in Grand Bahama. This means that you will not be getting a new hospital for many, many, many more years to come. We are still waiting to hear what's happening with the hotel, but mum's the word with what's happening with the hotel. Now I understand that we are having a employment project that is worth, I think, $4.7 million. I think the Prime Minister said $4.5 million. But you have taken away in your, I'm not yielding. You have taken away over $4 million. You've taken away over $4 million from the beautiful Grand Bahama project. Point of order?
State the point of order. What is the point of order?
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamagra.
Mr. Speaker from Kalani. You want to be the speaker also? You want to be the speaker? Madam Speaker, I just needed some clarity. The member is, Madam Speaker, the point of order is the member opposing the hospital building in Grand Bahama? Because that's a question. I just need clarity.
You're making this Grand Bahama.
He will be having an employment project of $4.5 million. But you are taking over $4 million from the beautiful Grand Bahama project, which hired many people. Well, if it's the same project, say it's the same project. Do not make it appear as though this is a new employment project, because the same people who were employed by the beautiful Grand Bahama project will be the same people who are employed by this new $4.5 million. So there is no new employment project. There was almost 300 people that was employed by the beautiful Grand Bahama project. And I thank you for that project, because plenty of people in East Grand Bahama were employed. But there is no new project. All you are doing is continue. You move $4 million from one head to another head. That's all you did. Madam Speaker, the PM also spoke about domestic economic conditions.
Sleight of hands.
He spoke about domestic economic conditions. Yes, the Bahamas had growth of 14%, which is very welcome news. In fact, they keep saying that they met in place a recession. They met in place an economic disaster.
Untrue.
But what they met in place was a growing economy, because in 2021, the economy grew by 13%. In 2022, it grew by 14%. So when they came into effect in September, it was actually growing.
Yes.
So they met in place a growing economy, Madam Speaker. They met in place revenue that was be above projections.
Yes.
I caution the government though, to read the central bank's report, which states that growth is slowing as we reach the end of the COVID-19 recovery. Also, the PLP is not doing enough for family island development. For example, Abaco, Long Island, Eleuthera, and Michael all had an economic decline. The most interesting thing about this, though, is that from 2020 to 2021, all those islands had an economic boom or an economic increase, growth. They had growth. In 2020 to 2021, it was economic growth. But after 2022, or during 2022, it went down.
Go Google it.
It went down. Check the statistics. Check statistics.
Go Google it.
The PLP has simply wasted an opportunity. They've wasted an opportunity on the Family Island Capital Fund. Madam Speaker, you remember last year. Last year, there was when they mentioned that they were doing this Family Island Fund, everybody was bombing on the table. Bombing.
Break up the whole
Oh, we're going to do wonders in the Family Islands. Well, do you know, Madam Speaker, how much money they actually spent from this Family Island Fund? $0. $0. It's in the budget. They spent $0 out of this Family Island Fund, Madam Speaker. But they've allocated the same amount for this year. Well, I hope they have a little bit more. I hope they at least spend $1 on this year, Madam Speaker. So the F&M created, Madam Speaker, a free trade zone for Family Islands, starting businesses duty-free, bringing items like cars and the inventory duty-free and VAT-free. The budget does not have enough or does not do enough to address the needs of Family Islanders, particularly in Abaco and Grand Bahama. Madam Speaker,
that's why Mike Allen here today.
The Prime Minister says in his budget communication, no new taxes. He said no new taxes in his budget communication. This is a complete load of you know what.
No, we don't know.
I am still trying to get my head around what was the government even thinking about by making that kind of a statement.
My Lord.
The budget communication should be clear and precise. You did increase taxes.
Yes, you did.
You did include new taxes and fees.
Yes.
It is plain and simple, and to say otherwise is simply not true.
Yes.
You added more to harbor dues. You added more to the Port Authority fees. You expect to have over, wait a minute, man. You expect to have over $1 million. You expect to have more than over $1 million in harbor dues. This will translate into higher shipping costs and higher import costs. So don't say that only 5% of Bahamians will be affected, because when you do this, all of Bahamians will be affected by the increase in costs. Bahamians will be paying more for food, more for gas, more for clothing. There is also an apparent new condominium tax on page 15 of the revenue stream. It's a new condominium tax.
Listen.
In fact, they expect to receive $2 million on this new condominium tax. You even call it a tax. So how could you then say that there is no new taxes? Under the new Business License Act, Madam Speaker, hotels, IBCs, insurance companies will be paying more, which translate into higher costs for Bahamian consumers. Then there is this new tourism environmental tax. They call it a tax. That's what they call it. We didn't say tax. They call it an environmental, tourism environmental tax.
Interchangeable.
This will be paid by cruise ship passengers. Now I ask, have you consulted on this? Where is the studies that show that this won't negatively affect our cruise product? Bahamians, though, will be paying an additional $4 for traveling in and out of the Bahamas. Bahamians will be paying, under your passenger tax, check it out, Bahamians will be paying an additional $4, $2 to leave, and $2 to come back. That was not said by the Prime Minister that Bahamians will be paying this additional amount of money. Bahamians will also, under the Tourism Development Corporation bill, the one that they don't want to debate, all tourism-related enterprises operating in the Bahamas will be paying a fee. Also, the road traffic, again, no mention about this, road traffic will now be charging a fee for a road traffic record. I'm not sure what the road traffic record is, but that's what they say. Also, on the sugar tax, studies have showed, and I've made this point before in the House, that studies have showed that yes, putting in place a tax on sugary items does to some extent bring the use of that item down. But what has an even greater effect is if you reduce the amount that it costs for healthy foods. That's what we are proposing. That's the solution to this. Reduce the cost on healthy foods. So, Madam Speaker, the F&M calls on the government to first, we call upon the government to first implement subsidies for healthy foods.
Members.
We call upon you to first implement subsidies for healthy foods, such as fruits and vegetables, before you increase the tax burden on working Bahamians. Madam Speaker,
Restrain yourself.
In the VAT bill, there is a section that deals with vacation home owners, Airbnbs. Now, Madam Speaker, we have a very strong Airbnb market that continues to grow. This provides a steady stream of income for Bahamians, but more importantly, it provides a steady stream of ownership for Bahamians in this tourism market. In fact, many Bahamians have opted to stay at Airbnbs when traveling locally. I stay in an Airbnb when I travel to Nassau. But the amendments made to the VAT Act, you have just made it. See, I'm not tuning into that. You have just made it more expensive. You've made it more expensive for me and other Bahamians to stay in Nassau, and you have made it more expensive for Bahamians to stay in the Family Islands. Because you have now said that if I stay at an Airbnb, which I will stay in an Airbnb if I come to Nassau or if I go to a Family Island, that I must now, those owners must now charge VAT. And no, they do not charge VAT now. They only pay VAT. They only pay VAT if their Airbnb is connected to a site. If your Airbnb is not connected to a site, then you are not charged VAT. Look at the VAT bill. The VAT bill says that whether or not your Airbnb is attached to a site, you are going to be charged.
For East Grand Bahama realize that any rental where the property nets more than $100,000 a year is currently subject to VAT. Currently subject to VAT. So if he stays at an Airbnb when he comes here, and it adds up to more than $100,000 a year, he should be paying VAT now. And so it strikes me, Madam Speaker, that they don't seem to read the legislation that they're critiquing.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
That is true. Then why is it that you need to have a section that says vacation home rentals, no, we ain't debating here. That vacation home rentals. I'm going to make my presentation. You can answer afterward. That vacation home rentals will now be subjected to VAT whether or not you are attached to any site. So I don't, the person who I rent the place from, it's not through a site. I pay them direct. So now, even if I pay them direct, I will now have to pay VAT. Once they charge me the VAT, I will now have to pay VAT. Madam Speaker, on domestic banks, the budget communication is known for what it says, but more importantly, for what it does not say. The budget communication is known for what it says,
tremendous omission,
but more importantly for what it does not say. Madam Speaker, 2 cabinet ministers spoke publicly of their displeasure of what the banks are doing to people, particularly in the Family Islands. This budget communication said absolutely nothing about it.
They ain't listening to you. You might as well.
They said this budget communication said it didn't even acknowledge that there is a problem with banking in the Family Islands. The Prime Minister took 2 hours last time and another 2 hours this morning, and I suspect he can take another 3 or 4 hours afterward. But did not mention anything about even acknowledging that the 2 cabinet ministers, yes, they are right, yes, there's challenges, and here is what we can do about it. It was completely silent about anything to do with domestic banking.
On the plight of our people.
Madam Speaker, one would have thought that this would have featured as a high priority to addressing and fixing this very serious problem. 2 cabinet ministers in this place spoke about it.
And 1 chairman.
2 cabinet ministers and a chairman
3 positions.
spoke about it.
3.
So one would have thought that the budget communication, that the 2 hours that the Prime Minister took today was going to at least mention and acknowledge that something is going to be done about fixing this challenging problem, Madam Speaker. Mum's the word, Madam Speaker. Mum's the word, as it said, when it comes to what this government is going to do to help those persons in the family islands. What are they going to do to help those struggling family islands, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, the sand dollar, the central bank's digital currency, is the first in the world. Countries all over the world are watching what this central bank is doing and what happens with this central bank currency. Countries from China, US, all over the world are coming and asking the central bank, what's happening, how is it working, what's going on, how is it developing? And there was no mention whatsoever on how the sand dollar will be advanced or integrated in the public sector. The FNM, Madam Speaker, started the process of allowing it to be used to pay for government services. What is the progress on this? What is happening with respect to that project? One of the things that we were very focused on, Madam Speaker, one of the things we were extremely focused on was how do we advance the entire digitization project? And I am actually with the member for Bain and Grandstown. I want him to succeed. I want him to build on the things that we started. I want him to succeed, and I want him to build, because that was a major pillar. That was a major pillar in the previous government's economic plan on how we continue this. And I hope that the member for Bain and Grandstown, when he speaks, will give us a complete report in terms of what's happening with it. How are you proceeding? No, I want him to succeed. I want him to succeed. Madam Speaker, travel and subsistence.
Oh yeah. Let's hear it.
Finally, the government has listened to the opposition and has listened to the people and has reduced the travel budget. Finally, they have listened to the people and have reduced the travel budget. However, it is still higher than the FNM budget of 2021-2022. It is simply unbelievable that you would increase the budget during the supplemental exercise. It is completely unbelievable that you would even exercise, that you would even go to that extent. They don't want me to talk. They don't want me to talk, Madam Speaker. They don't want me to talk.
Members. There's a member on the floor.
Discipline yourself.
They don't want me to talk, Madam Speaker.
Members.
Madam Speaker.
You're doing good, man. You're doing good. You're in education. Discipline yourself. Discipline yourself.
Madam Speaker. On ceremonial. No, I only have 9 minutes. Let me finish my 9 minutes. Let me finish my 9 minutes. Let me finish my 9 minutes, then you could speak. Let me finish my 9 minutes. I only have a little bit more to go, Madam Speaker. I only have a little bit more to go.
What's the point of order? Hang it. likes to tell us that 2021, the PLP was only in power for the last 4 months. It is disingenuous to compare 2022 to 2021. It would be more honest to compare 2022 to 2018.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Ceremonial spending in the cabinet budget. Madam Speaker, I cannot understand how you could spend over $3 million in 9 months on ceremonial events for this budget year.
We going back soon?
And we have also budgeted another $3.4 million for ceremonial events for this year. So we spent $3 million last year, and we budgeted another $3.4 million this year for ceremonial events. I understand.
You can't even count that one.
That it is the 50th anniversary. I understand that. But why have a party when the ordinary people are still suffering?
That's what it was. That's what it was.
Why have these events when the ordinary people are still suffering, Madam Speaker? I believe, Madam Speaker, that the committee wants to measure MPs for ceremonial jackets. So, Madam Speaker, I didn't get measured. I'm not getting measured. I do not need a ceremonial jacket. I could buy my own jacket. I could wear my own jacket. And I suggest, Madam Speaker, that we give the amount that they were prepared to spend to pay for a jacket for me. I suggest that you give that to a homeowner in East Grand Bahama to fix their roof or to fix their house. Because, Madam Speaker, it doesn't add anything to me for you to buy me a jacket to a pair. So, Madam Speaker,
Members,
again, small business assistance, Madam Speaker. You committed, the Prime Minister said that they were going to give $50 million for small business assistance. He didn't say that. I listened to this previous communication. He said they were going to spend $250 million over 5 years. He didn't say they were going to spend $50 million this year. That's a difference. Because if you look in the budget, there is no $50 million for small business development anywhere in the budget. We ask you to present to us where in the budget or where else you are going to provide $50 million for small business for $50 million. Now, Madam Speaker, as I begin to wrap up, there are a few things that I believe this budget should have included. Because the Prime Minister made mention about us, not, and the member from Marco City is going to lay out a complete economic plan for our country. He's going to lay out a complete strategy, a complete economic strategy.
2031?
But, Madam Speaker, one of the things that I suggest this government could have done or ought to have done is funding for
the same one you support. And you with me?
A national tax credit program
you and Chester
that gives you a tax credit on VAT or real property tax for employing new employees or for making investments. Madam Speaker, what we need to do is we ought to use incentives that would assist small businesses, not make it more difficult for them, but we need to provide them with incentives to hire more employees, to make more investments. And the way how we do that is by providing them with specific tax credits. Madam Speaker, it is a process that could happen because the FNM actually implemented and started to implement that process, where you could have used the monies that you would be paying for VAT. You could use that to pay for your new employees. Madam Speaker, number 2, the home porting program.
No, you ignored it.
Madam Speaker, there was a lot said in terms of the passenger tax for cruise ship passengers. So we are seeking to extract as much as we can in terms of the tax dollars from cruise ship passengers or from the cruise ships. But Madam Speaker, one thing that I believe this government may have missed during the pandemic that opened, I believe, all of our eyes, when Royal Caribbean decided to just have one boat to home port in the Bahamas. Just one. They have, I mean, I'm not sure how many ships that they have, but they just decided to have one boat, or one, they don't like when you call it boat, but one ship that home ported in the Bahamas. The economic impact that that one vessel had when it came to home porting, Madam Speaker, was tremendous.
The signal itself.
All you had to do was look at the photos of the persons coming in and out of the airport. The airport was completely full because you had persons who flew in, because let me just say for those who may not be familiar with home porting, was that you have people who fly in, you bus them from the airport, and then you take them to the vessel or take them to the hotel or to the vessel, and then they would go on their cruise ship. The cruise ship comes back here. They are then taken through our airport, and what it does is it means also that they will be able to spend even more additional time in shopping and money and hotels and so on. All we need is just one. And if we leveraged this whole position in terms of extracting the taxes, the additional taxes from them, Madam Speaker, and we said, we want you to just home port one vessel in the Bahamas, Madam Speaker, that would be a tremendous benefit to the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, also, we believe that what should be specified in this act is women, disabled, and youth small businesses funding. We also need, Madam Speaker, the additional digitization when it comes to additional services. We also need, Madam Speaker, actual movement on the Sovereign Wealth Fund and actual movement on the Family Island Development Fund. It cannot be where we just pass a piece of legislation and bam on the table and say, yes, we've done a wonderful job. We must actually implement those things and fund them, and then once we fund them, we must actually see it through so that it actually brings some benefit to us, Madam Speaker. Also, Madam Speaker, we must increase funding for Bahamians so that they can develop family island Airbnbs. That's right. One of the things that we had said we were going to start in our last budget was that we were going to provide funding for Family Island when it came to them developing the Airbnbs. All we need to do is look at Exuma. I spoke to a lady this morning from Exuma who said that Exuma is booming because all of the residents are rented out as Airbnbs. Well, Madam Speaker, imagine if we provided the same kind of funding that is necessary in all of the other family islands so that people would be able to develop their own properties and then would be able to rent them out as Airbnbs. Madam Speaker, there is a tremendous opportunity that is being missed by this government. All they needed to do was to provide the necessary funding to develop the Airbnbs. Madam Speaker, also, we also need a real Crown land reform, making it available for Bahamians, along with real land reform. Madam Speaker, if I could just have 3 minutes and then I'm done. Just 3 minutes and I'm done. 3 minutes. And then thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And then, Madam Speaker, we need to have a real Crown land reform, making those Crown lands available for Bahamians. Yes. And what we also need to do, we had drafted legislation, so the legislation should be there, was that once you put in place legislation for the land that people are, the generation property, so that generation property, you would be able to get title for the generation property, And once you are able to use that title to go to the bank and so on, Madam Speaker, getting title to property is putting wealth in the hands of Bahamians. And that is a real project that this government needs to pass. And then, Madam Speaker, finally, Madam Speaker, please, just pass the medical cannabis legislation. Just pass. All they needed to do was the legislation to be drafted. If you need to tweak it, you could tweak it. If you need to change it, change it. But just pass it. Because that, again, put wealth in the hands of Bahamians. It put wealth directly in the hands of Bahamians. And so, Madam Speaker, as I take my seat, this budget, Madam Speaker, we are on our 50th anniversary. We are on our 50th anniversary. This budget should have equated and should really have put forward a bold, it really should have put forward a complete strategy, a complete 50-year strategy. It is a missed opportunity to develop how the Bahamas was, how the Bahamas is, and how the Bahamas ought to be for the next 50 years. So, Madam Speaker, I am very pleased. I am very pleased, Madam Speaker, to conclude this budget debate. And I am sure that the member from Marco City, and along with all of our colleagues, will specifically say what should happen and how this country should be improved. Madam Speaker, this government is done.
The member, come on, Madam Speaker. It really.
The chair recognizes the honourable member from West Bahama.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the member raised earlier, he asked about whether or not he said the budget did not have any allocations for small and medium-sized business support. And he said the money is not here, but it's in the budget. It's in the Ministry of Finance, 5.5 million. Because you haven't read it, so you need to look at it and read it. You need to read it before you comment. And Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, and the member for, it's always interesting to listen to the former minister responsible for Grand Bahama speak about what should happen when nothing did happen. Madam Speaker, we now move for the suspension of the House to Monday, the 12th of June at 10 a.m., Madam Speaker.
Second. Thank you, honourable members. It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House be suspended to 12th of June, 2023 at 10 a.m. Monday, 12th of June, 2023 at 10 a.m. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The business of this House stands suspended until 12th of June, 2023 at 10 a.m.
All right.
Still go to the UN, no? Yes. We're talking about 2026. 2026. 2026 he's talking about.